Mangkualam.
공동이 역전을 만듭니다. 이천의 갈비를.
Winners of the AFC Champions League 2020, Ulsan Hyundai.
You're listening to the K-League United podcast, proud partner of Football Nation Radio.
Hello, 안녕하세요. Ryan Walters back in the K-League United bunker once again after another week off. You know, it's been double game weeks. It's been busy. There's been a lot going on, but I am joined by the men that are becoming very quickly the usual co-hosts around here. And for those of you watching live, a very fashionable Michael Redmond is here.
Hello, everyone. Now we're live. Now we're live. It looks terrible.
No, it's great. Leave it on. For those listening to the podcast, we've got Michael set up with one of the we'll say commentator headsets that Pete made famous. So now we've got two ET fingers. Pete Hampshire is also here. Pete, how you doing?
Hey up, gentlemen. Very well. Barnsley are in the playoffs, mate. You're going to have to get used to even more Barnsley talk next season.
Barnsley. What is this Barnsley team? I haven't heard or seen anything on Twitter about this Barnsley you speak of. Supposedly there's some American there that's doing some things.
Yeah, Daryl DK coming to a Premier League stadium near you.
That's
not
right.
Not for Barnsley, probably, but.
And I will say before we get started, just because he's been bothering me on Twitter about it, Scott Whitelock, this one's for you. Come on, you Reds. That's as American as you'll get it. I'll do it in like the action announcer later. But anyway, Michael, speaking of red, you were out this weekend and you're in the shadows today because you got a little bit of a lobster thing going on, eh?
Yeah, Redmond, red sun burn. Seoul was blistering hot on Sunday afternoon for that game against FC Yangyang. And I do it every year. I don't know why I do it. I look at the temperature, go, wow, it's going to be hot. And I don't slap any sunscreen on. Let's just say, tomato, lobster, pizza. I've been called everything this week.
Well, at least you have hair on the top of your head because when I get burned, the whole skull hurts. All right. And I did that recently. I went out for 5-a-side because I need to remind my body that I hate it sometimes and make it run for 2 hours when it's not used to it. And I also came home with a sunburn, but scored a goal. So
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. It may have deflected off of somebody, but it doesn't matter. Counts for me all the same. Doesn't matter. And I didn't die. Anyway, we're not here to talk about my 5-a-side exploits. We are here to talk about all things Korean football because we had a week off last week. Not a full week. You did have the weekend preview, which Pete's going to be hosting again soon. Anyway, we're going to talk very briefly about the men's Olympic draw. Sadly, there is no draw for the women's side in South Korea. We'll talk about the men's draw very briefly. Then we'll move on to talk about K-League 2, which I think will get a very similar reaction from Michael, the feeling for K-League 2. We'll talk about it. Then we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about somebody that I won't shut up about, that we're always talking about, Asnawi Mangkualam. We are going to be joined by Aun Rahman, and we're going to talk about how he's doing in K-League, the expectations in Indonesia, his position being moved upfield, all those kind of things. We'll talk about that and have some highlights as well. Then we'll come back. We'll talk about the K-League 1 weekend that was for a little bit because there weren't a lot of goals this past weekend, but we'll talk about why that might be as well. And then we have a massive mailbag this week. Turns out when you mentioned that Asnawi is going to be featured in the mailbag, a lot of folks that are new to it pop in. So hello to the folks that are viewing anew with Asnawi as one of the topics. And then we also have an announcement for Patreon at the end of the show today. So jam-packed show, which is what it should be after a week off. But gentlemen, let's go ahead and let's get into this here. Let's talk about the Olympic draw. South Korea has been drawn into Group B with New Zealand, Honduras, and Romania. And, well, we'll go into the bracket afterwards. But, Pete, way back when we used to talk about national teams more often, you were one of our national team columnists when international football was a thing. What's your takeaway on this draw?
Yeah, obviously, on paper, the group draw, New Zealand, Honduras, Romania, it looks fantastic. But then you've got to look at, if they do get through that, it's who they're going to play next, because all the other groups are jam-packed full of top teams. But yeah, they've got to be pleased, haven't they? They'll be favourites for that group. I'm sure. And the only problem is such a small squad is 18 players are going to be available to them. How on earth do you pick 18? Because we've seen so many players who you would fancy for that squad on form, especially on the wings. How on earth is he going to pick an 18?
Yeah, that's not going to be an easy trick at all. Michael, before we get into the squad, which I think we'll do in another show because that could be a whole thing. But like you say, Pete, I think it's going to be a really difficult decision. How far do you think the men's team can go in the Olympics? Will they get the medal that they need for military exemption?
Well, they've done it in the past. Obviously, when it comes to Olympic football in Korea, they've had success in the past of doing so. Obviously they're gonna. I think they're more than likely going to get out of that group, aren't they? But look at who they have to face in the next round. It's either going to be France, Mexico, or Japan, as such, which would be very tasty if that drawn in the quarterfinals. But you never know for Olympic football. It is completely up in arms. Look at the other side. I'm just looking at the brackets here. Looking at the other side, it could be quite a tasty semi-finals and final, even if they get to that far. But we'll see. I think they'll definitely get out of the group without a hitch. And then after that, it could be anybody's, really.
Well, like I say, I think getting out of the group could be one of the problems there, because if they win the group, then they get the runner-up of Group A, which consists of Japan, South Africa, Mexico, and France. Yeah, so even the runner-up of that group, oof.
That Romania side as well has beaten off some good competition in the last year, so they're not to be underestimated.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I don't really think there's an easy group per se when you've only got 16 teams coming in as well. And, we've seen what players of this age bracket can do. We've seen that on full display with the Korean youth teams lately, but definitely not to be underestimated. And like you say, Pete, I think it won't be easy, but Michael, I also agree with you. I think they will get out of that group, but man, do you want to win that group? Do you want to be runner up? I don't even know. So it'll be interesting. We'll see how things play out there. And again, we'll have more on that as the time gets a little bit closer and as the squad gets selected. So let's move on to the party. Let's move on to what we all want to talk about. Let's talk about K-League 2. Michael, I won't start with you. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Pete, hop in there. What we're going to do is what we've done before. We're just going to each pick one match here because we don't necessarily have time to go through all of them. But just really quickly, the results from the weekend were Gyeongnam 3, Bucheon 1995 0. Ansan Greeners 1, Daejeon Hana Citizen 1. They wish 0. Busanai Park didn't manage to get a goal against the mighty Jeonnam Dragons, who won 1-0. I'll talk a little bit about that. Seoul Eland fell to FC Anyang 2-1, and Gimcheong Sangmu continue to be the team we thought they might have been before. They won 2-1 over Cheongnam Asan. So, Pete, of those matches, which one drew your attention?
I picked the tasty clash down at the bottom, the current bottom two sides, Gyeongnam 3, Bucheon 0. Lee Jung-hyup, he's rumoured to be leaving the K-League, but he scored his first goal of the season. And Hernandez,
coincidental timing.
Yeah, maybe he's got that confidence boost. You never know. Someone wants me, I'm going to bang a goal in. But Hernandez, who you know well, obviously, Ryan, he banged a couple in as well. It was the first home league win of the season for Gyeongnam, and I actually tipped them to win the league in my predictions ahead of Gimcheon, who a lot of other people chose, and those two have not started particularly well. Gyeongnam, they really need Baek Sung-dong, Hernandez, who came off the bench to score a couple last weekend. They need those two and Willian to really pick up if Sol Ki-hyun's going to be in a job by the end of the season. And hopefully, for my prediction and for Gyeongnam, this is the start of a run, because obviously it's not too far into the season. The stats for Gyeongnam are quite interesting, because even though they're currently 9th, they're second for expected goals, possession and crosses. Perhaps they've just been passing it around too nicely and messing around rather than just hooping it up. When you've got players like Lee Jung-hyup up front, maybe you don't want that fancy football. You just want to get it up the other end of the pitch.
Pete, don't encourage more Route 1 on the
On the other side of the story, there's Bucheon, and I know our columnist George Slade put a question in the mailbag, the bulging mailbag for later on, but it's not looking too good For Buchon, 10th. Their striker Krislan, who they brought in, I was checking him out earlier. He's not actually scored since 2018. And the only man who has scored for them this season is Park Chang-jun. He scored all of their 3 goals in their first 8 games. Is it? We're on round 8. So, yeah, Buchon looking like they're in a bit of a pickle this season.
Yeah, we'll save that one for the mailbag because it is. Yeah, it's not looking great for Buchon. So, Michael, we'll use that as a segue because things are very dire for Buchon FC 1995. Great story about them out on Twitter right now if you want to see it. Anyway, it's not that bad for Seoul Eland, right?
Well, here's the thing. Knowing me last year from on the podcast, I wouldn't have said anything bad about them, but the way they played last season and the start they had this year to then go and lose 3 games on the bounce, I'm at my wit's end, quite basically. I kind of feel I just don't know what's going on. I just really don't know what's going on. It all started with the Cheongnam game when we lost in the dying moments of the game. Now, don't get wrong, we beat FC Seoul the next game, so it's not about momentum, but momentum in the league-wise, it's just gone pear-shaped for Seoul, and it seems like teams are starting to suss out what Seoul are doing. What I'll do is I'll start off with a personal experience, and I'll move into what happened in the game itself. Beautiful day. Once again, the Seoul Eland marketing team, they had away from home day out. So obviously you can't travel because of restrictions at the moment. Come to Seoul Eland, get your ticket stamped, get a little suitcase with some goodies in. So half of me is like, take Seoul Eland seriously. Other half, let's all wear Hawaiian shirts to the game. And that's what we did. Put my flags up, sat down, and Yango.
It was fast.
17 seconds. And obviously, some teams go a goal down early, and you think, okay, they're going to keep going and they're going to fight back. Anyan scored another. Anyan scored another, which got ruled off of VAR. Eland had 3 goals in the back of the net, midway through the second half. And I was just sat there I watched his team win 3-0 in Busan. I watched his team beat the Army Gimcheon Sangmu 4-0. Where is this same team that we saw a few weeks ago? Now, it must be said, it's the same team week in and week out, really. It's the back 3 of Kim Hyun-hoon, Ian Jae, Lee Sang-min, and there's constantly mistakes being made at the back now. What does Kim Jung-hwan need to do to get a game for Seoul Eland to start? He started in the cup games, and he's been absolutely excellent for Seoul this season. How he doesn't start? Another player, Kim Jong-wan up front, he's Seoul Eland's top goal scorer. His 7 starts for Seoul have all come off the bench. He's not had a single start for Seoul in the league. What does he need to do to start for Seoul Eland? I think at the minute, personally, there's a lot of players in that team who are okay, you're that certain person, you play no matter what, where they're not playing under, maybe they perform well in training, but based on how they're playing in league games, it's quite strange to see who are actually starting every weekend.
Yeah, so, I think there's something to be said for consistency and keeping things going. But I think, like you said, after 3 losses on the bounce, it probably is time to look at switching things up. Any encouragement out of the late goal in that one, though? There was a 77th minute strike from Hwang Tae-hyun that, they could have just buried their head and called it a 2-0 loss. Because like you say, it looked like it was going to be 3-0 there for a second. And any glimmers of hope from that?
Well, that's it. Anyan could have took the sword to Seoul Eland on Sunday. They could have had about 4 or 5, to be honest. But some positive news, really. Captain Kim Young-goon, he came back and put the captain's band right on him straight away. We played better when he came on the pitch. Eland changed it around when he came on the pitch. Hwang Tae-hyun, debut goal. He almost had the goal in Gimcheon, but it was actually Kim Jong-hwan's goal instead. There was a bit of confusion, but it was his. This was his goal, and no one was taking that away from him. So there was some positives towards the last 15, 20 minutes of the game. Eland just couldn't find that equaliser. And it's a bit of dire straits at the moment with Seoul. They're free-falling. If they didn't have such a great start they did, then we could be down there with Gyeongnam and down there with Buchon. But, I don't want to go back.
That's
to the
K2,
old
though.
Seoul.
That's K2, isn't it?
I don't want it. I don't want to go back to the old Seoul again. I've had 3 years of heartbreak. I don't want any more.
Well, The real heartbreak will come when they make the playoffs, right?
Tears
Anyway.
of joy, honestly, yeah.
Let's move on to another team that might be making the playoffs. And the game that I picked here was Ansan Greeners 1, Daejeon Hana Citizen 0. The Greeners continue to just defy expectations and prove that anybody could beat anybody in K-League 2 this season. Quick side note here, the Jeonnam Dragons also won over the weekend with Jonathan Balotelli getting the game winner against his former team in Busan. Bam. But I'm not going to talk about that game. I'm going to talk about the Ansan Greeners because that's back-to-back wins for them. They're up into 4th place now. Both of those have been 1-0 victories as well, which is the second best defensive record. They've only allowed 6 goals against in 8 games. Only the mighty Jeonnam Dragons is better than that with 5. But I think it says a lot about Ansan's defense that they've been able to do this. They've been able to hold so many clean sheets with Asnawi playing in a more advanced role, because when he first came into the side, he was playing more as a wingback and doing well defensively, but with him further up the field, they've still managed to lock things down at the back. And it's impressive from Ansan, but obviously we're going to talk about Ansan a lot after the break. So I think the other thing to mention here is that despite the loss, Daejeon are still top of the heap. It's the first time this season they've been held scoreless. So I don't think there's a ton of concern for Daejeon there. And kind of like I was saying, for you, Michael, with Seoul, this is just K2, man. A club will win 2-3 games in a row, and they look like world beaters, and it looks like everything's going to go their way, and then they'll lose 3 games in a row. But I mean, the thing is right now, and this is why K2 is the business, man, because Daejeon is in first with 15 points. You go all the way down to 8th to Busan, they're on 10 points. There's 5 points separating 1st and 8th right now. It's lovely. It's so nice having a competition, unlike K1, which we'll talk about later. But I hate you, Ulsan. I don't, but I do, but I don't. Anyway, we'll talk about it later. But K2, I think all sorts of fun going on there. And Ansan Greeners, they're turning into a really fun team to watch. Obviously, I have a bias because I'm always going to want to watch Southeast Asian players, and I think Asnawi's doing well, which again we'll talk about soon. But they're turning into a rather entertaining team, and that mint green kit, it's growing on me. Just gonna say, it's growing on me.
It reminds me too much of Manchester City's 90s shirt for some reason. I don't know. I don't know if me just having a soul bias today, but it reminds me of Manchester City, and obviously I'm a Manchester United fan, so that's all that needs to be said there.
See, it reminds me of the Mighty Ducks. They just got to come out there with the flying V and get this thing over with.
Anyway. Who are the Mighty Ducks? For those of us that aren't aware.
Who are the Mighty Ducks? Only the 1990s Emilio Estevez-led Disney classic, The Mighty Ducks. They made an actual NHL team out of this movie, guys.
I don't think it aired in Yorkshire, that one.
This is astounding to me. We're gonna talk about this probably in the mailbag, but we're running a little bit long here, so we're gonna take a quick break, and then on the other side we're gonna talk to Aun Rahman about Asnawi Mangkualam. We'll be right back.
FNR is a revolutionary football-dedicated digital platform, the first of its kind in Australia. It provides a 24/7 live online radio platform experience, podcast hub, and acts as a content provider for TV, radio and digital. Having reached millions of listeners and football fans since launching, FNR is accessible worldwide via its website or app, providing a platform to discuss, debate and celebrate the world game. We are your voice of football, FNR Football Nation Radio.
Welcome back to the K-League Unite podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Walters, and I am joined by a very special guest this week, talking all things Asnawi Mangkualam. It's Aun Rahman. You might recognize him as a podcaster from Box to Box Indonesia, the widest podcast network in Indonesia. Aun, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Ryan and K-League United, for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to finally talk about an actual player from a Southeast Asian nation actually playing games, playing well. We'll get into all things Asnawi in just a second. But just for the folks tuning in for the first time, when did you first see him play?
Okay, the first time I see Asnawi play is in National Sports Week in 2016. Asnawi play for his provincial team, South Sulawesi. The tournament is for under 23, but in that time, Asnawi is only I guess 16 or 17. So he make big impact. He play in the central midfielder, and he bring his team to the final, to gold medal match against the host province, West Java. Despite they are losing, I think Asnawi especially doing really good in the tournament, and he scored one goal. What I remember, the final match is really most remembering for me because Asnawi, a 17 years old young midfielder, he must face more experienced midfielder and also got more name like Abdul Aziz, Febri Haryadi, and Gianzola. But in that time, Asnawi was really resilient. He shows his strength. Even though I must admit to you all, my purpose in that game is to see other player in Asnawi team. His name is Nur Hidayat Haji Haris. He's a center back. But in that game, I see, well, who's this young fella? He's really good. I think he is 23, but no, he is 16 or 17, I think. That's the first time I see Asnawi. Then in Liga 1, 2017, and I see his development is really outstanding.
Yeah, so you've been following him for a little while, and for the folks that I've been able to convert into watching AFC Cup, it's fantastic. And that's where I first came across him, was in AFC Cup, where he's had plenty of moments in front of some really, really big crowds. Most of the time that I've seen him play before he came to K-League, and I believe in most of his career, he was played as a wing-back, whereas now with Ansan, he's being deployed a little bit further up the field. He's playing as an out-and-out winger a lot of times. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that transition into more of an attacking role for him?
I think it's really good because the first time we know, Indonesian football public know, Asnawi is really strong defensive midfielder, Ryan. But then in national team, he moved into right back position. What we see is reverse thing when Philip Lam from right back to defensive midfielder. We see the reverse case in Asnawi. Wow, this kid can playing really good right back. Then what I remember is Darie Kalezik, PSM Makassar coach before Asnawi leaving to Ansan. He played Asnawi once in attacking position in one game, I remember, and it's turned out good for the team. But then in next game he back to defensive midfielder and then back to right back. What I can say is the transition is really good because Indonesia is known for the fast winger. We proud that we produce really good wingers, and maybe Asnawi is one of them. I remember that Korean media said Asnawi is Indonesian Park Ji-sung. Yeah, I'm very flattered with that because Asnawi got everything to be a really good winger, especially his drive and his crossing ability. Also, his movement, he got everything. He got a potential to be really good winger. Because like I said again, our nation, Indonesia, is really known for producing excellent winger, especially in Southeast Asian level.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that hopefully we'll see that open a door for some more players to be able to come in here. We did see over the weekend, he got his first assist in K-League, playing in that more advanced role. And we'll definitely get to that in a second. I mean, we always love talking all things K-League here, but just before we move on from that a little bit, do you think that this transition and where he's playing with Ansan, will that change where he's playing for the national team? Because obviously Shin Tae-young was very involved in all of this, and he was actually there the same day I was watching him, which was a happy coincidence. So I think that he's watching that development closely. Do you think that this is something that'll affect Asnawi when it comes to playing for the Indonesian national team?
It can be because maybe Coach Nim Sin want to a winger who preferable with his tactics. Right now, so far the winger he wants maybe not playing at the level Coach Sin wants. And Asnawi may be the player he wants from the level of playing for the tactics and anything. But the problem is we already got many winger. Even Bagus Kavi who play in Utrecht, also a winger. So I think it will be great addition in the area. But we already got much player in winger position. But again, I think Coach Shin Tae-yong will field the player who ready and got the best ability too.
Yeah, and let's keep it on Shin Tae-yong here. And I think it's pretty obvious he had a big hand in getting Asnawi up here. So a couple of questions on this one. First, obviously we know how things are here in Korea. How has this move been viewed back in Indonesia? If the numbers on Twitter are anything to go by, it's quite good. But
yes, of course.
What's the talk on the street like down there? How has this been viewed?
What happened in here is everybody want Indonesian player move to the east. I think to the East Asia. We know there is J League, there is Chinese Super League, there is K League. We are dream our player playing there because we think they are the place where is the Asian football, top level Asian football playing. So when we heard the news that is Asnawi will play in there, even there is not the top flight, we're really happy. We're really proud because the last time Indonesian player play in East Asia region is on 90s. There is Ricky Yacobi play for Matsushita. Now the club name is Gamba Osaka. So it's really long time since we see Indonesian football player playing for East Asia team, which we think the region, like I said before, is where the top level football play. So everybody is proud, especially where Asnawi came, Makassar. They are really proud with their player. I also advocate the players to play in K-League because I think K-League have many opportunity to our player than any other league in Asia because there is Asian quota players and we may show something in K-League and then we make our football into the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been what I've been hoping to see out of the ASEAN player quota since it was introduced. And I personally love seeing this happen in K-League 2. I love seeing an ASEAN player come up and play in K-League 2 because unlike what we've seen with Vietnamese players coming over recently, Asnawi is actually getting minutes. He's starting most of these matches. He's playing well. He's integrating into the team. And I think that so far, I think all sides involved will have been very happy with this. So that leads into my second question on this and Shin Tae-yong being involved and that Korean connection. Do you think this summer we'll see more Indonesian players moving to K-League?
Yes, I believe yes. I believe there will be more Indonesian player will come to K-League. I heard there 2 players already have a trial in another team in K2. I heard the news, but they did not pass. And then I think many players here have potential to play there in K-League.
Are there any names that you want to put out there that folks might be able to watch? Or we'll also, I'm always trying to sell AFC Cup hard. I love that tournament. It's always fun. So specific players would be great. If not, who are some teams that folks could watch? Because I feel like it's getting a lot easier to watch tournaments throughout Asia. So maybe folks will go into a match not knowing who to see. And much like the first time you saw Asnawi, they'll be impressed with somebody. So who are some of the players or maybe some of the teams that you would really recommend people keep an eye on this year?
For K-League fans, I have several names actually. First, I think our Indonesian Messi, Egy Maulana Fikri, who play in Lechia Gdańsk in Poland, in my opinion, he better play in Korea. In Korea, and he plays. The problem is Egy not got really much minute play in Poland, so maybe he got better minute play in Korea. I have to suggestion a young player named Beckham Putra. He named after David Beckham. He really good. He play in midfield. He play for Persib Bandung. You must really see him. He's gold, and then Pratama Arhan from PSIS Semarang, left back. It's modern left back. He also got really great free kick taking. But for all name, if I must say one name who will move to Korea this summer, there is one name who will be ready. He will be shine. I will say Osvaldo Hai from Persija Jakarta. He is a forward. He's fast. He's sharp. His movement is good. He's great. He already have trial in Spain, I believe, in Murcia. But then back to Indonesia. He played to many big clubs in Indonesia: Persipura, Jayapura, Persebaya, and now Persija, who recently won the Piala Menpora. And then Osvaldo scores in the final too. I think in all name, yes, Beckham, Pratama Arhan. But if K-League won a ready player, right player, the player who's ready, Osvaldo Hai is the right player who should move to K-League in the summer.
He can even keep wearing the Persija red. He can come move to Seoul, put on some red and black, and I'd be fine with it. Like you say, folks that might not know, Persija, absolutely massive. And I'd love to see that fan base engaging with K-League as well. But yeah, I hope you're right. I think that there is a lot of talent out there, obviously. And again, if folks aren't watching, watch AFC Cup, watch the Indonesian League. It's fun. There are a lot more goals than there are in K-League sometimes. But if folks do want to find out a little bit more about Indonesian football in general, where can they find you online and where can they learn more?
You can reach me at Aun Rahman, same with my name, but with double R, because somebody already stole my name on Twitter. I don't know why. There is Aun Rahman with double R.
Okay.
You can reach me. You can ask me anything about Indonesian football, because I'm talking about Indonesian football with English. So you can reach me in English. The conversation will be good. I will answer for anything you ask me.
Great. Well, Aun, thank you so much for taking the time today. And hopefully we see that Asnawi goal sooner than later. And hopefully we see some more Indonesian players up here in Korea. But thanks again.
Okay. Thanks again.
Fans, we want to hear from you. You're encouraged to email KLU at info@kleagueunited.com or tweet at KLeagueUnited with any questions, comments or reactions. Or follow us on Facebook to ask directly during one of our live shows.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Walters, with a brief wardrobe change for those of you that are watching live. I'm joined by Pete Hampshire.
Hello, mate. I'll just unmute myself.
There you go. And Michael Redmond.
Good evening, everybody.
Gentlemen, we're back to move on from K-League 2, sadly, and move on from the Asean player quota, sadly. For now, there is a ton about that in the mailbag. We're going to move on. We're going to talk about K-League 1. And this might be you know what? This isn't going to be a brief segment because I got things to say. Anyway, let's talk about the weekend that was. Pohang Steelers, 0. JG United, 0. Gwangju FC, 0. Daegu FC, 1. Gangwon FC, 1. Go get them, Gangwon. Jeongbuk Hyundai Motors, 1. Which set things up lovely for Ulsan Hyundai on Sunday, where they finished 0-0 with Incheon United. Let's move on to Suwon FC and FC Seoul, 1-1. A barn burner for the weekend. That's another Americanism for you guys. And Songnam FC, 0. Suwon Blue Wings, 1. What happened this weekend? What happened?
I have no idea.
12 teams. Was it 6 goals?
Oof. Yes, it was 6 goals in total, 2 0-0s. And, I'm frustrated. By it. But Dan Croydon pointed out something in the KLU group chat, which is always lively. The teams have got to be tired, So I do think that caveat has to be thrown out there. The teams must be tired right now. We've been playing double game weeks for what feels like forever. And another thing that I think I know we'll be talking about in the mailbag as well, because we got a ton of questions about it. If the teams are tired, then maybe you should use your 5 substitutes instead of subbing people off after 2 minutes, Suwon FC. But again, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, I'm ranting. I'll pass the floor for now. Michael, we'll start with you for this one, since we let you get away with not starting K2. Which of those matches drew your attention from the weekend that was?
Well, after this most entertaining of weekends in the K-League 1, I went with Pohang 0, Jeju 0. Only for the fact is that obviously I watched Jeju United a lot last season because they were in the K-League 2. Now, it must be known they were a K-League 1 team in 2019, got relegated, come back up again. They should never have been relegated. They had a really off season. But if you just look at how they started this season, you must take into account newly promoted team. They're currently signed third with 4 wins, 7 draws, and 1 loss.
Yeah.
Out of 12 games. That is, a very draw heavy, a lot of draws, but I give them kudos, like fair play to you. You are throwing your weight around in the K-League too. I was looking at the stats actually in that game. Pohang had 427 passes met by Jeju 308 passes. So they had almost a third more passes than Jeju. Now, I don't know what you want to make of that, but did Jeju sit back and let Pohang pass the ball around? Were Pohang frustrated not to score a goal against them? What was Jeju's tactics with that? But if you look at their 7 draws, you must look at the fact that maybe they are playing a more defensive, structured side team, and then they just maybe break on a counter or maybe a set piece to try and get a goal. Jeju and Jeonbuk, they're both teams with the best defensive record with 8 goals conceded. So they're getting the job done in the back. Yeah. And I mean, they also played Jeonbuk as well. Was it a 1-1 draw, I think, a few weeks ago? So they are showing their worth. I've put here, obviously for Seoul Elan purposes, Ju Min-kyu, is he having a bit of a renaissance? He's
sure.
We know he's an exceptional player. He's already scored 5 goals this season, only 8 last year. So, I mean, we're only a quarter of the way through now, and he's already only 3 behind. The last time he was in double figures were back in 2017 when he was playing for Sangju Sangmu, which is now Gimcheon Sangmu for those who know. Looking at Pohang, I always have to throw K2 whenever I can. Looking at Pohang, Song Min-kyu, he's the danger up front with 5 goals already this season. Do they really miss Ilyachenko as the firepower? Could you imagine if he was in that side partnering up with Song Min-kyu? He had 9 goals in 12 rounds last year compared to their top goal scorer of 5 now. So it's just interesting to see 2 teams that, they played a stalemate 0-0 draw. They're both looking probably at next week to see what they can do. Jeju, they play Jeonbuk, who still are undefeated this season in the K-League. If they manage to get anything from that, if they manage to even win, then they close the gap to 6 points. But, I do doubt it'll probably be a 0-0 draw again. If Pohang, they play Suwon. Now, if they beat Suwon, they go to 3rd, as long as Jeju drop points, and it'd be 4th if Jeju did get that all-important win against their Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. But things are hotting up around that 3rd, 4th, 5th place. It's looking quite interesting for them, that ACL race. And, I tip Jeju to keep going and playing the way they are. They just look comfortable in defense. They just look a comfortable outfit if they only have lost 1 game this season.
Yeah.
Newly promoted team lost 1 game this season. So you've got to give them a bit of credit when it's due, really.
Yeah. Like you say, they're getting it done, and they're getting it done more effectively than I think most of us expected coming back to K1 with things going the way that they are this season. Speaking of things not necessarily going as expected, P, you made the long trek over to see Gangwon and Jeonbuk play in person.
Yeah, my first trip to Chuncheon Stadiums. Chuncheon, the home of Son Heung-min. We didn't bump into any of his family members, unfortunately, but we did go for some dak galbi, which is the traditional food of that region, and it was fantastic. A nice little chickeny dish on a flat pan, if people aren't familiar with the Korean food. Yeah, I saw a 1-1. It wasn't a great game, in fairness, but judging by the other games, maybe I was lucky. And Jeonbuk were lucky to come away with a point. It was a good atmosphere in Chuncheon. I think it was one of their first games at that stadium. They were playing it over in Gangneung earlier this season. Lots of clappers. I know people. And there's mixed opinion on the clappers, the boards that you've whacked together, but we're in a pandemic, you can't shout. So yeah, it was a good atmosphere. It was Paek Sung-ho's first start for Jeonbuk. He didn't cover himself in glory particularly, but he got his first. He started ahead of Chae Young-joon for the first time. And John Buck, incredibly, they're still the lowest shot takers in the whole division, and we're through to round 12 now. It's just, it's incredible. You would not have thought that at the start of the season. The 12th for shots, but also first for goals. I'm sure there's not many leagues around the world with that kind of statistic, which I just find incredible. Gangwon, I thought I'm still tipping them to finish 4th this season. I put them there at the start.
Right. That's right.
Playing well. Hankook Young played well. Their goal was fantastic, a lovely header. There was only 2 bits of quality in the whole game, and they both resulted in goals. But yeah, an enjoyable trip. Not too much because of the football, but more because of the surroundings. A fantastic venue, surrounded by mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think my big takeaway was that Takahiro Kunimoto has an amazing headband. It's like this light rainbow colored headband that he is just rocking right now. That was about the highlight for me. That, and like you say, anytime I can watch Hankook Young play.
One more talking point before you move on. I know you've got some questions about the subs in the mailbag, and John Buck used their 3 subs quite early, relatively early. And that meant that to bring on the full complement of subs, they had to swap out their goalkeeper because he was one of the only 2 under-22 players. And they were all warming up, these 4 John Buck substitutes right in front of us, but in the end, they decided not to use them. So Kim Sang-shik, the John Buck manager, kind of blocked himself from tactical changes because of only having under-22 players. And then I think he didn't want to take the keeper off because it was such a tight game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a mess, to be honest.
We'll touch on that in the mailbag. The whole substitution thing is a big old mess in general right now. I see we've had a couple of comments come in throughout the show. Some folks talking about a match that I'm going to talk about right now. So we'll get to that in a second. And Matthew Binns is also just saying that John Buck aren't shooting until it's scoreable. So great to have Matt's presence on the pod, even when he's not here. So John Buck, I'm going to look at that as kind of points dropped because Gangwon's form before that, you would have expected John Buck to go there and get a point. On the night, I think Gangwon were actually unlucky not to get full points, but that set things up perfectly for Ulsan to go to Incheon. No disrespect to Incheon here, but how do you not get something out of the league's worst defense? Incheon have shipped 21 goals. That is the worst in the first division, and Ulsan got nothing. This game finished 0-0. Props to Incheon for this. They came out and played a really good defensive game here. But this is the thing with Ulsan year after year after year. John Buck finally dropped points. Somebody finally did them a favor and dropped some points. What does Ulsan do? Nothing, because that's all they ever do. It's just a bunch of nothing when John Buck sets it up for them. Kim Ji-hyun, 8 starts, 0 goals so far. It's not good enough from him. And Michael, kind of like you were talking about with Seoul Eland earlier, my question right now is, what does Lucas Hintesier have to do to get a chance for this team? He has 6 appearances so far. Only 2 of them starts, and he didn't even play in this game against Incheon. It's 0-0. You've got a striker on the bench. What are you doing?
The thing is, I think some of these managers, they think they're playing a long game. They think they're playing tactically from the first minute to 90 minute. I think they're so set in their ways that they just don't even contemplate switching the game around, where even if the game isn't going to how they planned, they just think, well, no, I've got this plan now. I'm just going to keep going with it. Do you know, honestly, when you look at a lineup of a team, you see the subs bench, every week you can look at them and go, you're not playing. You're not playing. You're not playing. And you just know before the ball's even kicked, no matter how the way the game goes. And maybe he's just out of favour with the manager at the moment. Is he putting the effort in training? Is he just not fitting into the role at the moment for what the manager's thinking? It's bizarre, quite frankly. Yeah. I think that if you're drawing a game and you've got a strike on the pitch, get him on there. Maybe he can go and prove something.
Yeah, it's baffling. That and maybe the most surprising thing out of all of this was Kim In-sung with the miss of the season. I mean, my goodness. We started the show talking about how not so great my 5-a-side is going these days. I could have scored that goal. I guarantee you, I would have scored that goal. Wide open net, a deflection comes to him. I mean, this would have made Chris Wondolowski just cry in shame. If you guys don't get that reference, that's fine, because it's a heartbreak for me and every single American soccer fan. That's right, soccer. Anyway, wide open net, and he just somehow misses it with his left foot as well. Like he used the proper foot. He's on the left side of the net. He had the whole thing there, and he somehow got it wide. It was just Ulsaning. It just, it was frustrating. It's just so frustrating.
In the first half, though, I thought Incheon played some of the best football of the weekend.
Yes, let's end on the positive there. I do think that Incheon came out with a game plan that they were effective in. I mean, when you've got Ulsan coming to town and you get out of there with a point, I think that's a job done for Incheon. If you can get a win out of that, fantastic. But the way that they set up, the way that they frustrated the wingers specifically for Ulsan, who that's where most of their joy has come from this season. Delbridge probably had his best performance for Incheon so far. He almost gave one away there, but he got lucky. And I thought he put in a pretty good performance for them. And yeah, never doubt Incheon. Incheon's always going to get things done. And they're picking up points a lot earlier this year than they did last year. Incheon's going to be fine. They might even finish mid-table, which wouldn't that just be lovely for Incheon fans? We've got a early question coming in here from Bins on YouTube, but I'll say we'll touch on that first because it does touch into the mailbag questions that we have. We have a ton of those, so we're going to take a really quick break, and then we're going to come back and hop into the ultra stuffed OG Luis mailbag. We'll be right back.
OG Lewis is your neighborhood British bar and cafe located in the Old Giro district of Seoul. Decorated in old English antiques and furniture for a true homely feel, you can enjoy homemade scones, cakes and afternoon tea during the day, and traditional British favorites like beef stew, English ale, and a fine selection of wines at night. Available for private parties or simply an evening out, OG Lewis is sure to become your favorite neighborhood pub. Be sure to mention K-League United at the bar during your visit and you'll get 10% off your bill.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Walters, and I am joined this week by Pete Hampshire and Michael Redmond. And gentlemen, before, you know what, we're getting the mailbag started the way that we always should, with the 94th minute with Clint coming in and saying he just saw that Chris Wondolowski miss. Oof. Yeah. I was with about 20,000 other people at Soldier Field in Chicago when that happened. You have never heard so many people cry out loud at the same time. Anyway, let's move on to something not equally as dire, but something dire, and it does touch into some of the comments that we've had come in throughout the show as well, which thank you for those, by the way. Keep those coming. We're going to start with Osri Furman, and he's saying that it's now 3 in a row where Ulsan has failed to score. Is this a bad case of confidence issues, a center forward problem, or something else? And that kind of ties into what Matthew Bins is saying on YouTube. Is it Hong Byung-bo? Is it the manager? Pete, you've watched this team a lot.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on earlier with Lucas Hinterseer, I was looking at his career this afternoon while I should have been doing schoolwork, and he scored 42 goals in the German second division for VfL Bochum. How is he not getting on the pitch more against teams at the bottom of K-League 1? I'm not quite so sure, and just needs to trust him and give him game time, because if you're coming over to Korea for your first ever season, you need those minutes in your legs. You can't just be expected to produce randomly off the bench in spits and spurts. He needs trusting. They probably put a lot of money into signing him in terms of wages. So why not give him those minutes?
Yeah, he has all of 226 minutes so far in 6 appearances. And like I said earlier, only 2 of those are starts.
But I will put myself on the line before you move on and say, I've seen more of John Buck, and I think in the next maybe 5 game weeks, I think Ulsan will catch up with John Buck. It's not all over.
Well, Pete Hampshire with a glimmer of hope for us. Speaking of glimmers of hope, Michael, let's move on to one that we got via the email. Slid into the email here. This is from Donguk, and he said, "Are K-League 2 teams now starting to know Seoul's game and adapt to it? Seoul Elan, we should say. How can Chung Jung-young change his tactics?"
Well, yeah, simply, yeah. I do think teams are starting to look at Seoul Eland and go, right, we need to mark Leandro, right, that the defense isn't as powerful as we thought it was. It wasn't a brick wall. Loop balls over, and certain defenders, Isai Midi and JD, struggle to head the ball properly, quite frankly, to be blunt about the situation. So these teams are starting to notice that Eland look vulnerable. He needs to, personally, my honest opinion, I think he needs to switch it around a little bit. I think he needs to give some of these players a rest who have played every single minute so far, and bring in some players who are on the bench, some game time. Free at the back, a lot of teams play free at the back. Anyang played free at the back. Also, Asan and Daejeon, who were playing free at the back in recent games. Maybe stick someone behind at the moment. Have 4-4-2. Just go for maybe like a 4-3-3 because he likes to play free at front. He likes his Leandro, his Babiogo, and his Benegas trio up front. But maybe just stick an extra defender at the back, especially when you're having shaky times as it is right now, where you're not even conceding for fun, but you're conceding to lose games 1-0, 2-1, 2-1. Like the other team's not running away with it, but obviously mistakes are being made. We've conceded 5 goals in 3 games. So
yeah, squad rotation. I think that's the thing for both of those teams. I think that's it for Ulsan and for Seoul Eland right now. This is a slightly tougher one. We'll stick with you for this one, Michael. George Slade has come in here and he said, is there any way for Bucheon to save their season, or are they destined to finish bottom again this year?
This 2021, that 2020 Bucheon team reminded me of Eland in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Not so much 2017. We went on about 11 games without a single win. And I think Bucheon did about 9 or 10 last season without a single win.
Yeah.
It just mirrors Eland performances from 2-3 seasons ago. I don't want to break George's heart, but I just don't think they're going to get off the bottom this year. Unless Eland take a plummet, and obviously be the pessimistic Eland fan. I just can't see them. They just don't have the oomph and the drive to even push themselves at the table. I watched them personally a few weeks ago against Eland, and we won 4-0. And it could have been about 5-6-7. Eland weren't, they were on fire, obviously, but they didn't play like they played against Incheon or played against Busan. They were a bit, going at like 80% rather than like full pelting it. Could be a long season if you're a Bucheon fan.
I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but that Park Chang-joon, who seems to be having a good season, is the only player to score for them this year. Yeah. So if he gets injured, then what are they going to do?
Only goal scorer of the season for them. And you must think 8 rounds in, you only have one goal scorer. Wow.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think they'll need to really hit with their summer signings if they're going to be able to do anything this year. It's a very important window for Bucheon, and I don't know if they're going to make a ton of movement because I think that they're trying to build through youth right now, but they've got to have somebody to help score some goals. So big summer window coming up for them. All right, let's move on. This one is from Confused Patrick. Love that Twitter handle. Confused Patrick on Twitter is asking, any reason for the lack of ASEAN players in K-League despite having the special slot prepared for them? Seems that Asnawi is the only ASEAN import playing in Korea. I've ranted a lot about this. Pete, you want to field this one? What's going on here? Why aren't there more ASEAN players in K-League?
Well, I think one reason is the nature of the league. There's only 22 teams in the top 2 divisions. And you've got a lot of managers who just trust those same old faces round and round again. We've seen Suwon Bluewing sign Uros Jeric. We've seen Lee Jung-hyuk go to Gyeongnam. They just love to trust those same old faces and no ambition, no drive to do something different. I think that's part of the problem. And when there's only 22 clubs, you just start to run out of options if those other clubs are taken up by the old hats.
Yeah, 22 clubs without an opportunity for those below them to move up. I think this is the thing. In Thai League next year, we're going to see another team that's come from the 3rd division get promoted twice and make their way up to Thai League 1. We can't see that here. And I think that that's part of the problem as well, is that if there was a K3, K4 club that's really ambitious, comes up through the ranks, is using the ASEAN player quota effectively, or just plays a different style of football. I mean, I think that's one of the bigger problems in general, is that there are just too many teams playing too similar of a style that a lot of the Southeast Asian players don't really fit into. But hopefully now that we've had Asnawi come and play well, hopefully that'll change things there. But I don't want to stomp on any other questions. So we got another one. Speaking of the the good Twitter handles coming in. This one's from Pump It Up with an exclamation point as well. Love it. They're asking, what is your opinion about the massive reporting around Asnawi in the media? Is it good or bad for his progress? Personally, I think this could be kind of a good thing for him because he is here. He's getting a lot of attention. But it always has to be done through a translator. So he can't necessarily be hounded in the same way that he could at home, where it's his native language all the time. So that's me. Is that just with rose-colored glasses, though, Michael?
I think you might want to look at a bit like a Freddie Adu moment here, where everyone's everyone's topping him up to be like the greatest thing ever. But he's had a fantastic start. You've got to give him the credit. But if he starts veering off slightly, or questions going to be asked, even of the K League in general, like, he's not suited for the team, he's not suited for the league. But right now, he's been playing good for Ansan. Like, he's had a good start. And you must remember, first few games into the season for him, because he didn't start at the start of the season. So, so far so good. And if you want to look at the marketing and the media of the teams as well, Ansan now have like 40,000 followers on Instagram. They've gone from like last in the K League 2 to like the fourth in K League 1 and 2 combined. So shirts have been sold left, right, and center to Indonesia because of his following. I've changed it slightly from him to the club level now. It's a good bit of business to have him in the league, and his quality is showing that there's spots there for him. So maybe he does deserve all this media presence.
I mean, I think that's kind of the thing, is that look at the attention that we're getting on this league with one Indonesian player here. Imagine if other teams actually took advantage of this quota and we had multiple Indonesian players. We had a Vietnamese player, which we'll get to in just a second, Thai players. I mean, if this league could actually represent Asian football in the way that I hope that it can, then I think that the benefits are very, very numerous there. And I think that the reporting is going to have to be a part of that. I think we have to have eyes on these players. I mean, you brought up Freddie Adu. The two things I would say on that, the first thing is that there is a really great podcast series by Grant Wall called American Prodigy, where it's essentially a long form interview with Freddie Adu about his career. Fascinating stuff. Highly recommend that. And the other thing on that is that Freddie was 14 when he started playing for DC United as a pro. And it was all of America saying, okay, go and save this sport for us. So a little bit less pressure, but I do think it's not a bad comparison, because there is a lot of pressure on Asnawi to succeed here. And he's done pretty well so far. So hopefully he can keep that up. But again, full mailbag. So we'll move on here. This one's from Ben Casey. And he's asking, thoughts on why Park Hang-seo seems to not be making similar moves as Shin Tae-young in terms of recommending Vietnamese players to K-League clubs. Pete, I'll throw this one back to you.
I'm sure Vietnamese players will have been recommended to some clubs, or at least been on the radar. I think it's more those clubs haven't taken up the gauntlet to take a risk on them. And clubs might worry that they have to settle players in, where other international players, like we see a lot of Brazilians and Dutch players in the K-League, they've got those contacts and settled paths how to settle those players in. Perhaps they're worried about that. But they're going to look at Ansan Greeners with their example of how to do it with envy, because they're up to fourth and they're getting all that attention. And maybe he hasn't been involved with a K-League club, Park Hang-seo, since 2010, with a club that can actually choose who it signs, because he was at Sangju Sangmu, and perhaps Park Hang-seo over in Vietnam he's just lost some of those connections because it's been a while since he was active in K-League.
Yeah, I think the other thing there is that a lot of the Vietnamese players have come up to K1. When we saw Win Kong Fung here recently, he was with Incheon and he just wasn't getting the minutes there. Again, to me, and I'll keep saying this, I think the key thing is that Asnawi came to K2 and he's actually getting minutes. And I don't know that there are as many Vietnamese players playing in V-League 1 that would want to make that move. Don't think it'd be a bad one for him, though. I mean, look, Cecina started in K-League 2. Jonathan started in K-League 2. It ain't a bad league to get your start in. So we'll see. I'd love to see more Vietnamese players, but I think that we'll see. It's a tricky situation.
And I think a lot of it's not to do with the club problem with the clubs wanting to sign them. It's the background issues, because when I've been in the media zones, sat next to like the club staff this year, especially at Gwangju, I've noticed with the new foreign signings, they're all like wondering what kind of player he's going to be. The new foreign signings, it doesn't seem to be a massively well researched thing. When I was at Guangzhou the other week, it was like, oh, this Hayes he's actually quite good, isn't he? It was honestly like they've never seen him train or any research on him. So you do wonder how these deals get sorted out sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, we know from certain managers leaving their clubs because of these kind of decisions and not having a say in which players are brought in, that it's not always up to them. So again, hopefully now that there is an example of somebody coming over and having it work out, hopefully we'll see more. But we did have another one come in about current Asean stars that some K-League teams should look at. I'll just say, go back and listen to what Aun said in his interview. Definitely Osvaldo Hai. If you haven't watched Persija Jakarta in general, go ahead and do that. Get some eyes on him. You will not regret it. I will keep banging the drum of Safawi Rashid. Please get him over here. And once again, why not? What's a podcast without saying Wing Kong Hai should come to K-League? Why not? Those are my guys. But anyway, we'll move on. This is kind of a big talking point to end on. And we had two people kind of in the same note here. We talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. Charlotte Patterson came in here and she said, I know you guys have touched on it in the past, but what should happen with the U22 rule? Should they amend it so that players have to stay on for a minimum amount of time? She's suggesting 50 or 60 minutes. I think that might be a little bit much. Or should something else be done? That's also pretty much echoed by Bavarian Beasts. Oh, we got some good names. Bavarian Beasts, So Rare Club on Twitter as well. Loving the handles this week. And they were pointing out that the rule is just being absolutely battered by Suwon FC this year. A substitution after 2 minutes. Why even bother? I mean, Michael, what should be done about this season? Because something's got to change.
Yeah, it's tricky because you can kind of see their intention to try and get the younger players into the K-League and play in first team football. But like, it's one of them where I automatically thought when they said, give them a minimum amount of minutes, what if these players start feigning injury? Because obviously if they're actually injured, then you'd have to ignore the rule and let them come off for somebody else. But you start looking at things like that, like, what if the manager's told them, if you go down, you stay down? It starts becoming a very tricky situation. It's a really, really grey area. Personally, I like the idea of giving you an extra sub because of the under-22 rule, but the way the teams are abusing it is just, I just hate the way that they're doing it. So,
yeah, Cho Sang-jun, who was one of those lads who came off after 2 minutes for Suwon, he's played in 8 games this season, and his average involvement has been 24 minutes. And I'm not sure how that's helping because he's starting most of those games as well. It's not like he's coming on as the final push.
I mean, I guess my thing is, like, look, managers are always going to do what they can do to win a game. I completely understand that. But if you're taking them off after 2 minutes, you have the advantage of 5 subs. Why not just start the 2 guys that you replace them with and just have 3 subs as normal? I mean, again, we've talked about this before. You don't have to have 5 subs. You don't have to do it this way. You can just have a U22 player in the lineup, just one, and do 3 subs like you've done for the vast majority of your professional career. Like, I don't understand this tendency to have to do 5 subs because, again, they're just kind of going against it. They're kind of abusing it in a way, not in a way, they're just abusing this rule. And I don't understand the benefit a lot of the times. If it's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, okay. I'm not going to complain about a 30-minute one. I'm not, because if that kid comes in from the 60th minute to the 90th minute, we're not even talking about this, So 30 minutes in a game for a U22 player, I'm fine with that. I still don't really love first half substitutions, but with the rules at what they are right now, I don't have as many qualms with that, but I just don't understand this tendency. And Michael, I think it might just be like you've said before, of like, when they wake up in the morning, the manager's like, this is how this game is going to go. Regardless of anything that happens in said game, I will do this.
Yeah, it's one of them as well where, especially when Korea's starting to get warmer now and you're just going to start taking under 22 players off. And I can see why you're trying to do it. You can have an extra player during the hot summer, an extra player in the 60th to 90th minute, 70th, 90th minute. You can kind of see it. But Oh, it's just no, I don't like it. I really don't like it. 2-minute substitution should never be done unless you're injured. It should never be done.
Yeah, no, not a fan of that. All right, well, that does it for a very full edition of the LG Luis mailbag. If you have any questions, comments, reactions, as always, you can get those in on social at K-League United, or you can email us info@kleagueunited.com. Or if you would like to get more involved with the podcast and us in general, you can join our Patreon, which we're finally announcing this. We've been delaying on this for a long time. We are restructuring our tiers as part of our affiliation with SoRare. Starting next week, the $5 tier will have a SoRare exclusive of weekly team news, including injuries, suspensions, transfer rumors, and much more. If you get in at the K1 champion tier, which is the $10 tier, there'll be weekly predictions and starting lineups, as well as score predictions. So those are the new tiers for our SoRare folks. So if you're out there and you're curious about which players to start in your fantasy football game, we'll try to do our best, or we'll at least recommend some U22 players to sub off after 2 minutes. But anyway, K Survivor is still going on there. Michael, are you still on 3 lives?
I'm the only person left on 3 lives yet.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're clearly winning the writers pool then. Pete, you got 1 left, right?
Yeah, I'm clinging on by my fingernails with 1 life. Yeah.
Yeah. Gangwon did it to me again this year. I'm down to 1 life myself because I said, Gangwon, they won't let me down. And then they did. But we're so close to that turning over, and we're not even halfway through the season. So I think we probably will have another round of K Survivor. So if you want to get involved with that, that starts at just $1 over on Patreon. And we got a bunch of other things going on there. So patreon.com/K-League United. And again, the restructuring starts on Monday for our SoRare followers. And as always, if you'd like to listen to this podcast live, you can do so every Thursday on Football Nation Radio down in Australia. Another plug for A-League this season. I watched a 9-goal game on Friday, and it was almost enough to carry me through the K-League 1 fixtures on Saturday. It was almost enough, but it was all sorts of fun. 5-4 Western Sydney Wanderers ended up losing that game, unfortunately, to Melbourne Victory, but they were down 5-1 and they made it 5-4 with 15 minutes to go. It was amazing.
The depressing point that there's more goals in that game than a whole round of the K-League 1.
I wasn't going to say it out loud. But yeah, no, that you say that. And the last bit of business before we get out of here on that tremendous note, it'll be better this weekend, Michael. It'll be better this weekend. Junham and Seoul are both going to get some wins. We'll see a 6-goal thriller. It's going to be great. Anyway, the last bit of business is that if you would like to win a brand new 2021 Bucheon FC 1995 kit, you can do so by leaving a review for this podcast wherever you download your podcasts, or simply retweeting it from the K-League official account on Twitter. But for Michael Redmond and Pete Hampshire, I'm Ryan Walters. Thanks so much for watching.
전주성 공공 폭격기 킹 신우